So, Tenet, the most talked about movie that we haven't really talked about as a movie on this show in quite some time. We really haven't brought it up recently. So, I was particularly somewhat excited, cautiously optimistic, and I'm the kind of person that avoids spoilers when before I see movies. And I kind of wish I would have looked into spoilers of this movie before having seen it, although I don't think they really would have helped very much for this movie. Tenet is James Bond by way of unbelievable convolution and incoherence, to say the very least. This is a movie that I think is very experience oriented. And I think it is a lot like Dunkirk, Christopher Nolan's movie Dunkirk. I think it's very experience oriented in the regard that you want to see it on the biggest screen, the most immersive experience you can find. But when you're watching it on a TV with its just disjointed narrative and its soundtrack that basically just goes boom whenever something climactic happens, that's the best way I could put it. It's a frustrating 2.5 hour watch, to say the least. This is the type of movie I say is better in theory than it is in actual practice. And I'm going to start by saying this too, and this is going to be a talking point, at least for me going forward in this review. This might sound like a cop-out answer, but I'm sorry. When I know 10 to 15 minutes into a movie that I'm going to need to spend the time after this movie scouring Reddit and YouTube to establish some sense of a film's plot and structure and make some sense of it, that just ruins the experience for me. That just ruins the experience for me. It's one thing if I'm going to go scour the internet for more information on maybe, okay, I got this theme in mind. I want to look at how other people have analyzed this aspect of the movie or this. That's a totally different understanding. But to get a basic plot and structure understanding of this movie, it demands you do extra research. And I'm not a lazy person by any means, but this is the type of movie that Christopher Nolan's made that makes me less and less excited for his movies, because they are almost endurance tests. And that's where my frustration lies with Tenet at the end of the day.
Yeah, taking up the mantle there. It really felt like Christopher Nolan was high on Christopher Nolan when making this movie. This is the most Christopher Nolan movie I think he has put out since I've picked up on him. I don't know. I've seen Dunkirk, Interstellar, Dark Knight Rises, Dark Knight, Batman Begins. I should watch The Prestige again because I just wasn't old enough to even like pick that up. I have not seen Memento, Insomnia, and Following, but still, for a good majority of his career of things he's directed, he has established ticks and patterns as every director does. But here it is pumped up to 12, dude, and it cracks under its own weight of raw, like, I know it's a weight measured in Nolan's, and it's just so freaking much. It is just, I actually, so like after watching the movie, I went back and read just the basic Wikipedia plot. Like, just look up Tenet on Wikipedia and just look at the plot. I'm like, oh, John David Washington, he's in the CIA. I didn't know he was in the CIA. Oh, that's his handler. Okay, I didn't even know that. This is like basic first 10 minutes stuff. And I'm like, oh, okay, that kind of makes more sense now. And honestly, it got to the point where, for me, I felt like Nolan was just pushing the absolute limits in a not good way, that I just turned my brain off. I just turned my brain off, and I was just there for the spectacle.
Ditto.
However, there was a point about halfway through the movie where it actually started making more sense. And I think I'm going to give the benefit. I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt that Nolan was going for. Now does the first hour and 20 minutes make sense here? And I'm like, I'm going to assume that's what he was going for. But for me, it was more like, nah. No, see, now it's just like, oh, okay, now I'm okay. I guess now I'm watching a movie, like, as opposed to just watching someone trying to do something cool for the sake of it. And I understand that you can go back and everything makes sense, but when you cannot it's just too much. Because I understand the adage that, oh yeah, aren't movies that you can go back to and just get more out of it every time? Isn't that cool? Like, I'll go to Scott Pilgrim because that's one of my favorite movies. Like,
Yes.
yeah, every time you watch Scott Pilgrim, sorry if I stole your thunder there, but like every time I watch Scott Pilgrim, something cool pops up. Oh yeah, that little detail. No, not when it's like basic understanding of what's going on here. And I know people are gonna say, the Nolan super fans are gonna be like, you just didn't get it. It's like, no, he's too smart for you, dude. Come on, like even like. Again, going back to his filmography, like I got Inception like the first time I got it. I got Dunkirk the first time I got it. Even Interstellar, I'm like, okay, some of the black hole stuff at the very end. Okay, sure.
I know you haven't seen it. But even Memento, I kind of understood the first time around.
Yeah.
Even Memento, like, a couple Google searches here and there, or brief read or Wikipedia. Okay, I got it. I got Memento.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna punt it to Joe here because I'm stealing a lot of his thunder. But dude, there was a halfway point, but by then I was like worn out, and I was like, okay, sure. But go ahead, Joe.
Okay, I'm gonna piggyback off of one point you brought up.
Yes.
But I'm gonna clarify something. I did watch this movie again since we got it on demand.
I only watched it once.
I saw it in theaters, like you guys said, and I will. My rating will be everything that I experienced in theaters, not what I experienced on demand.
Sure.
That's how I'm going to go on this. But I will say this. This is the only thing I will say, and it's not going to change my rating at all, because at the end of the day, I'm going to wrap it up with something. I did understand this movie more the second time around, and I caught so much more the second time around. However, Steve brought up the biggest flaw with this movie. It is 2 hours and 45 minutes long. It is a long movie. Now, when you think of these other movies that Dom was bringing up, whether it be Inception or Scott Pilgrim, these movies at least hit 2 hours and then they start wrapping it up. Even Back to the Future, a film that we reviewed here on the show, is an hour and 56 minutes. And when you go back and you watch that movie and you catch everything the second time, third time you watch the film, whenever, it does it in a short amount of time. Tenet, on the other hand, yes, there is stuff you're going to catch the second time around, but you have to sit through some of the most boring dialogue I sat through in a film in a long time, of just exposition and exposition and exposition. There are so many characters here where literally their only way to tell John David Washington how they know this information is from the past. We learn this from the future. It feels like every time they have a conversation, it's like, I'm going to one-up you by saying I got this information from the future. But what you don't understand, John David Washington, is I got this information from the future. Well, who'd you get it from the future? Only the future knows. And it's just like, who the hell wrote this? And then you just see, it's just Nolan. It's just Nolan. And you think back to every film we've brought up here, and it's just like, my dog, I understood everything with Inception, Prestige, and all the other films you have written. Like, I got it. I got it on the first note. And when I went back to rewatch it, it like confirmed everything, or like, it clarified stuff for me that I didn't know in your film. He is one of my favorite filmmakers today. But I will say this, ever since Interstellar, to me, the quality of his films have been like this. Interstellar, to me, I didn't like. Dunkirk, I think, is good, but I don't love it. This, to me, is going back even down further past Interstellar, because with Interstellar, there is, like, at least an emotional element there at some points. With Tenet, the other issue I have with this movie is not only is the dialogue boring and flat, but the characters are too. The only person here with any life or emotion to them is Robert Pattinson. And whenever him and John David Washington are on screen together, there's actual comedy, there's actually, like, good chemistry. But when he's not there and it's just John David Washington, by God, is this movie just slow and boring. Like, and it really is a Bond movie when you look at the formula of how this is laid out. It even has its own theme song from Travis Scott, so it has its Bond song too. And
a Bond girl.
And a Bond. That's what I was gonna say.
Girl.
You have a Bond girl. You have a Bond villain with Bond villain technology and all this other stuff. You have the big climactic battle at the end where an army joins James Bond to take down the Bond villain. And it's just like, wow, man, like, this is the James Bond film we didn't get this year. The only problem is it's missing the charismatic parts of the James Bond movies, and that is the characters. Somebody else take it.
Joe has brought up a lot of my beef with this movie, because I got beef with this movie. I'll say that much. This is really, and the more I thought about it, And I'm not gonna lie, I read a few things. You almost have to. If you see this movie, I think you're obligated to read at least one think piece of this movie. And I did. And it got me thinking. This movie is really a culmination of sorts, kind of Nolan's filmography. You have the war scenes from Dunkirk. You have an espionage element of this movie,
Inception.
a la Inception.
Yeah.
You have a narrative that's to be decoded. Memento. I haven't seen The Prestige, but people have told me you kind of have to do some legwork with The Prestige in order to understand it. So you have elements that Nolan has dabbled in, or at least subscribed to throughout his entire filmography. But this movie, on top of being maddeningly incoherent, drains so much of the charisma out of John David Washington and Robert Pattinson. It turns them into vessels for a breakneck narrative where the only thing I can compliment them on truly is their suits. It made me thinking, I got to get me a nice suit. I got to get me a nice suit. You know what I mean? Looking like a lottery jackpot with some of these suits. But what you're left with at the same time, though, is a film that over-explains itself, and you still can't follow it. You still can't follow it. You still cannot follow point A to point B. I mean, here's the thing. The first 20 minutes, I admire that you drop me into a cataclysmic catastrophe at an opera house. I applaud that. You drop me right into the action and everything.
It's a great set piece, too.
It's an excellent set piece. I will not deny this movie's opulent production scale.
Oh, yeah.
I will not deny. It is rife with explosions, engrossing action scenes. I think the concept of inversion on its own looks great. It looks great. There's clearly money behind this movie. There's a reason they used, I think, a record-breaking number of extras throughout this entire movie. But it's so poorly explained. It's difficult to feel involved. And I'll say this too, just to put a cherry on my statement over here. Nolan can, at least as of late, Nolan cannot write characters. He cannot write characters very well at all. You saw it with Dunkirk. It was a problem in Dunkirk. It was a little better in Interstellar. But like even Elizabeth Debicki, who I think is really good here, but also criminally underused, it's like she's an abused wife and she has a kid. That's enough character development on her end.
She wants to be free. That's it. This is literally just her character development. She wants to be free.
Yeah, so what you're left with is a convoluted narrative, some very sexy production. I'll never deny you that. But what you're left with is a convoluted narrative that over-explains itself, so it loans itself to a lot of talky dialogue, and you have no characters to care about. I mean, after seeing John David Washington and Black Klansman and Robert Pattinson and everything from The Lighthouse to The Devil All the Time, I mean, in my opinion, he's the most charismatic actor 6 Ways to Sunday as far as I'm concerned. He showed his range the last 3 years more than I think any other actor that I could really name. You've drained the personality out of these men, and you've left them to be vessels in what is ultimately a convoluted, overwrought movie. That's
you drain the life out of Edward Cullen. How could you possibly accomplish? I'm kidding. Robert Pattinson.
12 years later. Look where we've come 12 years later.
The Robert Pattinson redemption arc has been fantastic, and I'm living for it. Just to back up a point Steve made about how Christopher Nolan kind of can't write characters too well, or can't really write too well. Dark Knight, which for me was, there's a lot of great character work in The Dark Knight, but even though Nolan did the screenplay and the story, according to Wikipedia, at least, he was assisted or potentially, maybe split 50-50, I don't know, story by David S. Goyer, who was a comic book writer, and screenplay by Jonathan.
Yeah, his brother.
Yeah, so, but according to Tenet, or at least Wikipedia says on Tenet, it was a complete Nolan affair in terms of the story, if I'm not mistaken on that. So, and if that's the case, it really shows. And, dude, the structure of this movie really is like 6 or 7 heists in one. It's like just like, oh, here's 10 minutes of build up to the heist, and then here's like the heist in 15 minutes, playing out over 15 minutes, and then it's just back to back to back to back, and it's so freaking exhausting. It's cool to look at, and this is an extremely gimmicky movie, which I hate to say it, because there's some awesome cinematography, there's like ambition here, and I love it when a filmmaker like puts in heart, soul, and ambition, and potentially is sacrificing the lives of its audience. But it's fine. I appreciate that. But when it's just too much. Like I honestly was thinking, towards the end of the movie, I was thinking, like, how many of these set pieces could I have cut? I feel like the apartment, thing where they're climbing stuff, they could have just skipped that entirely and downsized that character. I don't know. And then, like, well, the airport thing was cool. I don't know. I just feel like, not that I'm a professional script doctor, but it was just, what could I have taken out to just lift the load on this thing? Joe?
Here's the thing. It's like, I hate to bring up this part, but upon watching it a second time, it makes me realize how many scenes, like, are actually crucial to this movie now in retrospect. Okay. But like, here's the thing though, I'll give this to you, because on your first viewing, I was the same thing. I was like, damn, like, we could have cut like so much out of this movie. You know what you could do actually? You go to the script doctor and be like, hey, look, help me beef up these scenes to be more entertaining for people. That way they're not so bored and they feel like they're just going from one Call of Duty briefing mission state to the next. Like, you go,
because you're gonna lose people. You're gonna lose people that way.
The scene that Dom is talking about, you have this cool gadget they use to infiltrate like this penthouse. And then it's a long exposition thing with one woman. Then it goes to Michael Caine, and it's a long exposition thing with Michael Caine. Then
the mandatory Michael Caine scene.
Then it goes to what's her name? The Bond girl, basically, of this film.
Yeah.
Vicky.
Yeah, you go to her, and she gives an exposition, and her background, and everything. Then you get a cool fight scene in the kitchen, but then it goes to an exposition again with John David Washington's character and Robert Pattinson. And then you go to another heist, and there's exposition to be done in that. It's just like, oh my god, like, all these scenes are crucial because, yeah, they do actually explain something, and they go into detail onto why this is happening. They, believe it or not, as distracting and as exhausting as it is, this movie does fulfill the whole thing of, this happens, which means this happens, which means this happens, which means this happens. It wasn't like things are just happening. It actually does have that in retrospect, but to get I'm sure
it does. Now here's the thing. I'm sure it does. Now maybe this is going to sound ignorant. I'll say this much. This is absolutely the kind of movie I could see myself revisiting in the next 5 years or so, and claiming it is prophetic and it is genius and it is a masterclass of cinema. No, I'm not even being facetious when I say that, because it's one of those movies where you could almost sense there was a few points in this movie where I could sense, I'm like, this might be a little ahead of its time. And I say that because it treats time travel as like an interconnected, ever-blending loop, which fits with Nolan's. I mean, if you've read anything about Nolan's filmmaking process, and I'm not going to lie, I haven't read a ton, but I've read enough to know that he's very much involved with film in a very mathematical sense. Like, he's got really down to a science, like geometrical blocking, very mathematical, very smart dude. I will never discredit him for that. It must be nice to be smart. I'm jealous. Like,
yeah, it must be nice to understand this movie.
you know what I mean? Though it must be nice, but at the same time, though, it's admirable to see that, and that's kind of like, because I call this a defiant blockbuster. That's what it is. It's not going to spoon feed you anything. It's not going to treat you to popcorn entertainment. You got to be dialed in, and I can respect that. But at the same time, though, it's so alienating on the surface as well.
Yeah,
it's alienating. It is, because you feel like you're left behind so early in this movie, and there's no real opportunity for you to get sucked back in to this. I'm not going to lie, and I'll be completely transparent here. I'm not going to write a written review on this movie. I'm going to let this segment on Sleepless do the talking for me. But I was lost a good majority of this movie.
How can you not?
And Dom said it best earlier. I just buckled up, enjoyed the ride, and I enjoyed the set pieces of it. I truly did. But you just do not get the satisfaction of kind of even remotely figuring this out. And that is both frustrating to me. It's brave in a small, small sector of me, it's brave that you went ahead and did that as a filmmaker, but and dressed it up as a blockbuster. But it also, at the same time, though, it's aggravating. I don't need to fully understand a movie, but I need a baseline. And I feel like Tenet almost has an attitude, and Christopher Nolan has to wear this as well. They both almost have an attitude where they feel like they're too good to give you a baseline. You either connect with this movie, you jump on this moving train, or you get your leg severed at the beginning of it. That's what it boils down to, in my opinion. And if you miss the train, you're shit out of luck.
In some ways, I respect that, kind of, but in this sense, it wasn't very enjoyable, and it didn't do its job for me. But I cannot emphasize this point enough that, Dunkirk, Interstellar, the Batman movies trilogy, Inception, all those while they had tricks, intricate, whatever, mysteries to be solved, pieces to be put together. At some point in the movie, I went, aha, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, yep. Now it all makes sense.
It all comes together.
It all comes together. Even if I didn't 100% understand it, I got the main gist of it. In Tenet, so Steve, you said that this movie gives you no chance for it to hop back on board. I will kind of contend a point. That for me, I jumped back. I did get a chance to kind of jump back on board in the scene where John David Washington, spoiled in all sorts of trailers, but when it's not just the items that are now back in time. He himself has gone back into opposite world. I was telling Chelsea, because we watched it together, which was a journey in and of itself. I was like, this is just opposite day of the movie. This is like opposite day brought to its like fullest extent. But when John David Washington goes into backwards world, I thought, because for me, that actually took the time to really be like, hey, this is what's happening. This is the world that we're in right now. And we're going to take some time cinematically. We're going to take some time to really just breathe. Just even the mathematics. Like, I really felt like it was like a good 2 minutes of just John David Washington really going through this world. I keep saying his name, but I was like, what's his character's name? Oh, it's literally just the protagonist.
The protagonist.
Which I thought, you son of a bitch. You goddamn it, Nolan. That's some lazy freaking writing there. But okay, sorry. Beside the point.
No, it's genius.
You just don't understand it, Dom. You just don't understand it.
I will give him
red pill or whatever the wrong pill to take is. I don't even know at this point.
The scene where John David Washington goes into opposite world. I'll just call it that. I think it had time to breathe there, so I will appreciate that. But then when we get to Save It Private,
thank you,
Marty McFly.
Oh
when
my
we get
God.
to when it's trying to be Zero Dark Doctor Who over here with like two battles happening at once. I was like, I don't know. I was like, okay, you've lost me again. I was like, okay, nope. Okay, I'm just gonna enjoy the shooty shoots and just all the bullets and whatever. It's like, oh, that was cool with the apartment, whatever, block being blown up twice. Okay, sure, whatever. Joe, go ahead.
Thank you for bringing it up, because when I saw this in theaters, I had the exact same reaction you did. Where when he goes into the inverse world, if that's what I'm going to call it, or opposite day world, whatever you want to call it, I was like, oh, I get it, because you're visually seeing it now, which helps a ton too. It's
visually, yes.
It's like, okay, the protagonist, the protagonist is now in the inverse world. I'm with him. I understand this now. He's learning it as I'm going with him. God, if only the movie was doing this from like maybe the beginning of the second act. I was like, thank you. But when you get to that climactic battle, that is the only spectacle scene in this movie that I think is honestly kind of just it's just a mess. Because it's like so the whole thing is that there's one group of people going one way in time and there's another people going another way in time. So they're basically going like this is the best way I can describe it. They're going two different directions during time.
I think.
The thing is though, it's shot so sloppy because they're just shooting. You don't see who they're shooting at. They're just shooting, because I'm even thinking about, like, man, if you're a henchman for the Bond villain here, played by Kenneth Branagh, it's like, how do you even process, like, what they're seeing and how they're combating it? Like, buildings are being destroyed in one timeline and putting back together in another timeline, and it's just like, how do you process this? How do you stop the inverse people? Like, because if you go back and you watch that scene, it is just showing a bunch of shots of either Robert Pattinson or John David Washington shooting while bullets are going past them and running and explosions are going off. It looks cool because, yeah, there's explosions going off, but when you really think about it and you start paying attention more and more of, like, what's actually going on there, you're like, wait, I'm confused as hell now as how Tenet works as a concept.
When I was
as
watching
a concept, yes.
When I was watching that scene, specifically the war scene, I was thinking, like, I guess Nolan really needs to brush up on, like, how to do battle scenes in war. Wait a second. He did Dunkirk. He literally did Dunkirk. That was his last movie. What the hell, dude?
He literally had a war in Gotham in the last, like, Batman movie.
Also, that
Joe's got a great point, though, about how it feels like at some points, and I think you brought up an excellent point. You almost took the words off of my notepad over here too. It almost defies its own logical blueprint that it's concocted for itself.
Yeah.
In that respect, it's. If nothing else, we'll get into closing arguments here because we still have one more topic. We got all fired up. This has been a fun review. Let me say that much.
We've
This
been
has been a
blue
fun
balling
review.
ourselves for a half a year, so more.
I mean, at its most basic level, I'll get into closing arguments here. At its most basic level, Tenet is a defiant blockbuster. It is a movie that doesn't want to spoon feed you anything. It doesn't want to give you any easy answers. And at a point, I can respect that, but not even the bare basics is it wanting to give you in terms of this plot, in terms of kind of a layout. Because I go back to the opening scene, how it just drops you in the middle of this really contentious, violent attack. Ooh. And you just kind of like, you're running with it. You're running with the characters in that respect too. It's better in theory than it is as a 2.5 hour sit. Like, I had more fun talking about it with you guys in the last 30 minutes or so than I did actually watching it. Mm-hmm. And as a movie, I think that's a problem. As a movie, I think it's a problem. I will not deny the opulent production that went into this movie. It is gorgeous. It really is. Mm-hmm. And it shows that Christopher Nolan is a master of style, if nothing else. And I'm not going to deny that if you dig deep, you plunge the bowels of Reddit and YouTube, and you can understand and piece together this movie, and you can be the most fun individual at parties that you can be. I will not deny that to be true. At the same time, I think I speak for myself and many others because I feel like somebody too. I just gave a 3 out of 4 star review to the movie Mank on Netflix, which nobody's watched. The Gary Oldman movie about Herman J. Mankiewicz, the screenwriter of Citizen Kane. Nobody's watched it. Nobody's seen it. Nobody wants to pay any mind to it. I wrote a 14-paragraph review of that movie and talked about how great it is with its flaws. I understand loving something in a very niche format where it's like I'm speaking to the people who really want to get in the weeds with this. I think I speak for a majority of people when it comes to Tenet who don't have the time nor patience for it as much as they can admire the action spectacle of it and admire the Nolan name. As much as I can admire the ambition of this movie, this was not an enjoyable watch for me. It's 2 out of 4 stars for me, which might feel and sound slightly generous. I cannot deny ambition. I would rather see an ambitious failure than a mediocre run-of-the-mill movie.
Yeah.
That's what I will ultimately say. But it's 2 out of 4 stars for me. Ask me in 5 years, I'd be willing to rewatch it and give it another go.
Dom, you can go.
Oh, yeah. I took the words right out of my mouth. Ambition. I will always appreciate ambition. I appreciate the hell out of Christopher Nolan and what he's done throughout his career. He could have sold out in so many aspects, could have taken the easy way out. But no, man, he's a true artist, and I will respect him for that. And I'm so happy he's in the industry for that. But I think he's suffering from George Lucas syndrome here. where it's like, dude, you got to have someone. You are this icon.
Yeah.
You are this someone that people look up to. You are a legend, a living legend at this point. But you have to. Yeah, you need someone to pull you back now. You need to be challenged in a way, and particularly in the writing department, or just the story part. I don't know. I don't know. You're better at that than me, Nolan. I don't know what I'm talking about, but I do think that you have reached the apex of not your career, but the apex of your style. No, that's not right. I don't mean it like that. What I was referencing, maximum Nolan. We have reached peak Nolan in terms of just what he all of his own tropes, his own tricks, his own what have you. And as much as I do love them, and some good moments in here, all in all, the overall package that you are delivering it was alienating. I go back to that word that Steve brought up. Very good word, alienating. And it just wasn't a good time. And in the end, which hurts, which really does hurt, because Nolan's other movies, I had a good time with those. I had the epiphany. I had, that come to Jesus moment where it all comes together. And maybe I'm just stupid, and like this was the first movie that broke my brain, this was the one that challenged me the most. But hey, to a degree that's true. And not to say that I speak for everyone, but I feel like enough people have come together and said, hey, a little bit too much. Maybe ground yourself a little bit more. So I'm gonna give it 2.5 out of 4 stars, just because I appreciate it so much, and there were some awesome shots. It really felt any amount of Nolan is good to have in my day when watching it, but overall it just couldn't give me that complete good time. So I'll let Joe finish us off.
No, I'll piggyback off a point you were talking about. Actually, both of you said, and it is the ambition that Nolan has when he makes any one of his movies. It's the reason why he is one of my favorite blockbuster directors, because he started so small with not really blockbuster films, but just like really cool mystery sci-fi films like The Prestige and Memento, and then all of a sudden he proved that, comic book movies, we can do something bigger with them. And you have his Dark Knight trilogy. I mean, the one that matters the most, of course, is the Dark Knight. That really showed it in a whole different scale compared to the other two. But then he also showed blockbusters can make you think with Inception. But as Dom was saying, he just kept getting more and more attention on him, to where I feel like he does need somebody there to just kind of slap his hand and go, no, we need to lighten this up a bit, we need to fix this up a bit, like a
mediator,
just something. Somebody, man. I don't know if it was his brother that helped him write some of these films as well, but I go back and I watch those films. Inception is now in it's 10 years old now, and I went back and I watched it. Hell, I watched it in Fortnite when it had its 10th anniversary thing. And I was sitting there watching it while everybody was flossing around me, and I was still captivated by the film, enjoying the film. I'm like, damn, 10 years later, I love this movie. I love it even more now of what it wanted to do, how it doesn't use that much CGI, all these things that Nolan has brought to his movies, and he wants to make it a true filmmaking experience. And then upon rewatching this, now again, this wasn't 10 years later and everything. I saw it in theaters in August, and now I watched it in December. But upon rewatching it again, it's just nothing here has changed for me on how I feel about this movie. Yeah, I understand it a bit more, but you found a cool way to tell a story by using this whole concept of Tenet and time and inverse. You just forgot how to tell it. And you forgot how to tell it with really fun characters too, like you did with your other films. And at the end of the day, when your movie's 2 hours and 45 minutes and I don't give a damn about anybody in the film, and I don't care what anybody's saying, and I'm finding it exhausting, it comes down to 2 out of 4 stars for me there too as well. Yes, the spectacle is amazing, the action is amazing, but that only gets you so far for me sometimes, especially when you're a long film. If this was shorter and it wrapped up real quick, maybe I could have said, as they said at the beginning of this movie, don't try to think about it, just go with it.
They literally said
just
that.
Feel it.
When you had the cue of the movie literally tell John David Washington's protagonist that, I was just maybe I should have listened to that. But when your movie goes on that long, it's just dude, I can't go with it anymore. You gotta give me something more here at this point. But yeah, 2 out of 4 stars for me.
Excellent review. We had a lot to say about that, and I think in some ways, I think at least for this review's sake, the quality of this review lived up to its hype. In the fact that we've been talking about this movie for so many months, we finally got to watch it in the safety and comfort of our own home. I think that has something to say about it as well. So, excellent work, you guys.